You drop the hands, then I'll go. Right?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I dropped out of college when I was 19. I was the research assistant to Robert Greene. I learned how writing works that way.
This is at 21.
Yeah, in my 20s. To me, ego is sort of a collection of traits, right? It's arrogance, entitlement, delusion. Ego, I would say, is unearned. Ego is like what you want to be true, what your mom told you was true. If I could just help people put a slight pause in their life before they make decisions, before they take action, and just go like, am I doing this out of ego?
Ryan Holiday has lived a pretty incredible life, let's be honest. He dropped out of college when he was 19, ended up interning for people like Tucker Max and Robert Greene of the 48 Laws of Power, then ended up being the marketing director of American Apparel at like 21 years of age. And he rode this incredible upward stream of success, including books like Growth Hacker and other publications. And you just never know when Ryan will stop. And so his latest book, Ego is the Enemy, is one I was really surprised to see him write because I never thought Ryan had a problem with ego. And so last time we spoke about his book, The Obstacle is the Way. And this time I really wanted to find out what he knew about ego being an enemy and what he learned about it and how we can really understand the difference between confidence and ego. And we got some really good nuggets here, and I think a lot of us can learn from Ryan, including myself, and obviously check my ego, because sometimes ego can be a wonderful thing to drive you, but sometimes it gets in the way and gives you an inflated view of what the world is and your importance in it. And that's when big crashes happen. We're giving a bunch of his books away, giving away a signed t-shirt as well. So you can click on our Twitter feed and find out more about that. And I can't wait to talk with Ryan again in 2 years with his next incredible book and just watch this young man's journey. It's been absolutely awesome. This week on the Academy has also been awesome because one of our challenges was affirmations. And this is where people actually say out loud every morning things that they wish were true as if they already were true. And I got this from many of our guests in the past, whether it's Dan Pena or even Tim Ferriss himself. And you can wake up in the morning and say, I'm extremely comfortable being a billionaire and happy with all of the pressures and luxuries that affords. Or I'm extremely happy with my beautiful wife and 3 children and my blah, blah, blah. So if you want to check that out, come inside our brand new Academy on London Real and check that out. And in the meantime, sit back, relax, hang out, watch Mr. Ryan Holiday drop science about his life, about his practices. It's an absolutely incredible episode, and I hope you enjoy it. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mr. Ryan Holiday, the best-selling author of Trust Me, I'm Lying, Growth Hacker Marketing, The Obstacle is the Way, and now Ego is the Enemy. You apprenticed under Robert Greene, the author of the 48 Laws of Power, one of our guests. many years ago. You advise writers like Tim Ferriss and James Altucher on book launches, and you're the editor-at-large for the New York Observer. You were also the director of marketing at American Apparel, and your strategies in growth hacking and advertising are used as case studies by Twitter, YouTube, and Google. Ryan, welcome back to London Real.
Thanks for having me.
It's been 2 years.
Yeah, except for when we bumped into each other on the street.
True, that was like a year ago, right?
Yeah.
And I was out there filming myself with a camera, and you were like, that's just Brian, probably.
Well, it's funny how that works. Like, you could be in the middle of New York City or the middle of London, and you wouldn't think you'd be able to bump into someone you know, but you can.
And it was like, boom, right? You're always here to see Google or something.
I was speaking at Google.
And you do that a lot, right?
I did it yesterday. It seems, but it's just a coincidence.
Is it? Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
2 years, like a lot has passed. And I'm guessing probably lots of things were happening last time you were here with you in different aspects of your life. But when I saw the title, Ego is the Enemy come out, I was like, okay, that's the last book I would expect from Ryan. Because while last time you were here, we went through like your whole history, and I'd love for you to give us a quick synopsis of like late teens to Robert Greene to American Apparel and all that stuff. For a guy that has had kind of this kind of rock star-ish accomplishment life, you never strike me as the guy with an ego problem. Now I know this is what the book is about to kind of define that, but you've always been straight up, cool, very grounded, very down to earth when I met you every single time. So when I first saw the book, I was like, I wonder why he's teaching me about this. Do you get that from a lot of people?
Or I get the opposite. People will say like, how dare you write a book about ego? But I think what you said about sort of living a rock star life, I think the worst thing you could possibly do, even if you have an awesome life, is to see yourself that way, right? Like even if you are literally a rock star, the more you sort of catch yourself in the mirror and see like, oh, that guy's awesome, look how great he is, that is the surest way to jeopardize all of that stuff. So look, I don't think I would have never classified myself as some raging egotist, but I think anyone who has ambition, anyone who's trying to do big things, it needs to be wary of ego, and the more you can manage that and the humbler you can be, the easier a time you're going to have dealing with the things that come along with success. Like, I know you did jiu-jitsu for a long time. When you walk into a jiu-jitsu gym, the people who are talking shit the least are the best. The black belts are the quietest, they're the coolest, they're the nicest, they're the you don't have to worry about getting hurt by a black belt. It's actually an insecure person who thinks they have something to prove that's the most dangerous.
Yeah, and always the most vicious fighters always have the gentlest handshakes.
Yeah.
It's just nothing to prove. They also get a lot of their aggression out.
Yeah.
It's just the opposite of what you would expect.
Well, actually, it's funny, I came to write, the reason I wanted to write a book about ego and why I decided ego is going to be the focus instead of, say, focusing on humility or any other thing, is that I read Sam Sheridan's book, A Fighter's Mind, and he has another one called The Fighter's Heart, and he was talking about how paradoxical it is that the greatest fighters in the world are the most humble, and they're the most obsessed with their craft. Like, because jiu-jitsu or any really hard thing is so hard, it is inherently humbling. And if you make yourself a student of it and you focus on how much is left to learn always, it suppresses whatever that negative ego tendency can be.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. When we first started the show 5 years ago, all the first guests were jiu-jitsu guys that we had hung out with. I trained for 10 or 12 years. And these guys, the thing is, on the jiu-jitsu mat, you're constantly humbled. You're tapped out all the time, and you have to be the kind of person that comes back for more all the time. And so it really does breed some stoic people, now that I think about it.
And I try to be like that in everything that I do. Like, to me, jiu-jitsu was interesting because of that. Like, I have that in my personality, but I try to be that way as a writer. I try to be that way as a business person, just as a regular human being, is that you're going to try things all the time. Most of them are not going to work. You're going to get negative feedback. You're going to struggle with stuff. You can't change that, but you can you can decide you're always going to be the person that's going to come back for more.
Right. For people that don't know you, can you give us that quick intro of kind of you from like 18 to say 26? You did a great job in the book. I'm really glad you started the book off talking about you. I'm sure maybe you thought about not doing that. As I remember in Obstacle, there wasn't necessarily a lot of you there. And so when you put yourself in there and you put all of yourself in there, I was like, that really helped me a lot. Was that, first of all, can you give us the bit of it? And then I want to know if you thought that you didn't want to put yourself in there. Also, there's a great 10-minute video on Whiteboard that's out there that talks about your narrative, and it's kind of whiteboarded out.
Yeah, I think I read the intro to the book in that video.
And funny enough, it was even more powerful than hearing it on Audible when I watched it. And I was like, he is a rock star, God damn it. But for people that don't know, what was Ryan's early days like?
I dropped out of college when I was 19. I worked at a big talent agency in Beverly Hills. I was the research assistant to Robert Greene, who I know you've had on, and was a hero to me as a writer. I mean, he still is. And so I learned how writing works that way. I became the director of marketing at American Apparel shortly after that through Robert Greene, who was a strategist and a board member there. I did a bunch of really cool, crazy stuff at American Apparel.
Yeah, this is at 21.
Yeah, in my 20s.
And you're head of marketing and doing all sorts of growth hacking, guerrilla stuff.
Yeah, and I did marketing for Tucker Max, who was a #1 New York Times bestselling author, and I met Tim Ferriss, and I did some stuff for him. So I sort of came at this from two ways. So one, I'm sort of learning the craft of writing under a master of that craft, who's Robert, and then my day job is doing marketing for really cool companies and controversial brands. And so I sort of had these two tracks, and then they sort of merged when I wrote my first book about sort of an expose of how the media and marketing system work.
Which was Trust Me, I'm Lying.
That was Trust Me, I'm Lying, yeah.
Right. Okay, so, and is there more rock star stuff here?
No, I mean, look, you're always simplifying when you tell a story. There's more and less to the story probably, but what you were saying about the intro, like, the word I does not appear in The Obstacle Is the Way. I wanted it to be about other people, and I wanted it to be about timeless historical ideas. And I definitely set out to do that when I was writing, Ego. I didn't want to be in the book. And I thought it might be a little bit egotistical to be in the book. But my idea was that I would be at the end. It would be like, here's the book, and then let me tell you a little bit about myself. And that's how I wrote it. And one of the things, and this is why ego is so toxic, is that if you set out to do some creative project, you have a vision, you have a sense for where it's going to go, you have to be able to listen to feedback from your audience. Not your entire audience, but you have to have people who are okay giving you blunt, honest feedback. And you know, they said, look, this isn't working. Like, we need to know who are you to tell us about ego. And I really didn't want to hear that, and I fought it for a long time, and I tried basically every other option but that. And then we ended up sort of splitting the difference, and we came up with what it is. I mean, the first sentence in the book is, "Who the hell am I to write this book?" And I think it solved the problem that the early readers were responding to, and I think it made for a better book. But if you are so wedded to your vision, obviously you can't sacrifice every principle, but you have to know what's a principle and what's just stubbornness. And ego is really bad at knowing the difference between those two things.
Right. Because it's not always just me, self-interest. That ego piece can just make you make an incorrect decision, which could be better even for the book.
Right, it's like you're gonna get YouTube comments, and some of them are gonna say like, Ryan's an idiot, like, you know, he's worthless, he should kill himself. You don't listen to those comments, but maybe someone says something about your body language, or they say something like you said something and it was like I said something that was incorrect, or they said, have you thought about doing this? There is usually good feedback in there, and your ego is gonna wanna reject all of it. You have to be able to be objective enough to see what value can be taken even from really harsh and cruel criticism.
Right, and the book is a product of that too.
Yeah.
When you're writing a book about ego, are you constantly checking yourself even more? And like, how many people have said to you, well, now Ryan, you're writing a book about ego, and being a writer is egotistical, you're smiling.
Well, no, it's like, so you write a book about stoicism, which is what The Obstacle Is the Way is, so now I can't complain about anything. And then you write a book about ego, now I have to make sure that nothing I'm doing is egotistical. So it's a nice sort of public form of accountability. But, you know, I was making some decision yesterday about whether I was going to publish something or not, and someone didn't want me to publish it. And so I had to think, you know, is when someone tells you, like, don't do something, is this your reaction is like, who are you to tell me what to do? And so that's the emotional, egotistical reaction. You have to think, why am I acting the way that I'm acting? What are the principles behind this? Can I justify this? You have to be able to stop and look at yourself that way, and that's what I try to do.
Right. That word ego, I remember I had a conversation with a fighter a couple years ago, and we were talking about ego, and he said, that word has just been morphed and warped and taken for so many different purposes. It's almost a bad word even when you say it. Mm-hmm. Have you had to come to terms with the definition of it? Have you thought about using other words?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
So to me, ego is sort of a collection of traits, right? It's arrogance, entitlement, delusion, greed, selfishness, destructive, competitiveness to a destructive level, like I have to win and everyone else has to lose, that sort. So I'm not using it in the Freudian sense. I'm not using it in the psychiatric sense. It's more the colloquial one. I like Frank Shamrock, who's a great fighter, or was a great fighter. He talks about this in Sheridan's book. He's saying, there's a difference between ego and confidence. And confidence is based on what's real. Like you earn confidence. Ego, I would say, is unearned. Ego is like what you want to be true, what your mom told you was true. Ego is garbage, he says, and that's sort of how I'm thinking about it. So you have to be confident. You have to know what you're good at, but you also, I think, ego doesn't know what you're bad at.
Right, so just constantly check that.
Yeah.
So you're in LA, rocking and rolling, American Apparel, head of marketing, 23, 24, I think.
Yeah.
You pack it up, you go to Austin to write a book.
I moved to New Orleans.
New Orleans first. Yeah, I remember that. Okay.
That's where I wrote Trust Me Online.
I mean, that's a pretty big move right there.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because you were just maybe feeling a little bit tired of the LA lifestyle, of what you were doing, or because that's already a big move for you?
Yeah, I think. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you should continue doing it forever. Right. And I think that's a lot of why people get trapped in the corporate world is you're making a lot of money, you start making some financial commitments, and then you go, well, I'm not as good at anything else, why should I quit this? And so for me, that was a gamble, right? Like I wanted to write a book, but I didn't have a book deal. I didn't know if I was physically or mentally capable of writing a book. I didn't know if my idea was good enough, but this is, again, the difference between confidence and ego. I'd worked on books before. I knew that I wasn't someone who quit things. I knew that I'd taken risks before, and that I was able to recover if they didn't work out. And so it's, you do the calculation and you say, I'm going to do it. And so it was like, it wasn't sort of blowing up my whole life, but it was definitely like a sharp turn in a different direction. And I mean, it ended up paying off in a huge way.
Right, and you had left American Apparel at that point?
So I left there full time. So I ended up staying on as the director of marketing, but really I functioned more as like an advisor. So I still worked on all the marketing campaigns, I still interacted with all the marketing employees, but I didn't have to show up to an office every day, and I didn't have to do anything, I didn't have any deliverables every day. I just had to be a resource to the company.
Did they think you were ever coming back at that point?
I think they probably did, and I might have come. I mean, if the book hadn't worked, maybe I would have come back. So the funny thing is when you take risks, you should always be trying to protect your downside. Like when I dropped out of college, I thought it was like this life. I remember I went into the registrar's office and I thought this is like the point of no return. And she was like, yeah, you're just take it semester by semester. Just take a semester off and then see what happens. It's like, oh, all right. So it seems more momentous sort of in retrospect or when you're telling a story about it. But in reality, you're trying to always keep some plan B in case it doesn't work out, or at least I am.
Right. Talk about that first book and also your writing style. I distinctly remember you telling me how you write with the index cards and the Tupperware pieces or something like that. And it was like Robert Greene really taught you that. That sounds like a skill that you really learned from him. Is that true? And how do you write? A lot of people want to know.
Yeah, so I think with writing, people think it's like you sit down to a computer and genius just pours out. And maybe it does for some people and I'm not smart enough. But for me, writing, and I learned this from Robert, writing comes after the research. You have to do, sometimes it's a year of research and then a 3-month sprint of writing. The research is the hard part. The research is the ammunition. And if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how great the gun is, right? It doesn't matter how beautiful the sentences you string together. If there's not truth behind them, there's not material, it's not going to work. So I do all my writing on these 4x6 note cards, which is a system I learned from Robert, and they're all organized. So like Ego and Obstacle are both 3-part books with 10 chapters each in each section, so 30 chapters.
Right.
So intro, conclusion, and then 30 pieces. So that's 32 pieces, 32 small files, and each section is a collection of note cards. And I'm just consuming massive amounts of books and articles and podcasts and talking to smart people, and I'm collecting everything, and then once I have the pieces, then I assemble them in the writing process.
Okay. And short chapters. Did you pick that up from Robert as well?
I think so. I mean, some of Robert's chapters are long. I think his are much more in-depth than mine. I'll tell you, one of the things I figured out is like, if you can write a book that people can read in a day, like I love really long books. Like I'm in the middle of this epic like 1,000-page book right now, and I love it. But I find with motivational stuff, with philosophical stuff, if it can be something that if someone really gets into it, they can consume it in a day, that has a powerful impact on them because they're not going to get distracted. They're not going to, life's not going to intervene. It helps accelerate the process of the book. So I tried to write both these to be read in a day.
Yeah, I mean, even the size of them and the format is kind of this, oh, I can consume it. I can read this chapter. I can read this 7-page chapter.
Yeah, and my favorite books are books you can read more than one time.
Right.
And so if you make them in pieces, and each piece can be read independently, like you can just pick it up in the middle and start that piece, it makes it more ingrained and enmeshed in people's lives. Like one of my favorite books is The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and they're just little notes to himself. So you're like reading self-contained thoughts, and I've tried to mimic that a little bit in my books.
Okay. Stoicism. All right, so first of all, you write your first couple books, Trust Me I'm Lying, Growth Hacker Marketing. They do really well, correct?
Yeah.
You're now a writer.
Yes.
Okay, we're rocking and rolling, and now you go on this Stoicism left turn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but going that way, you had to take a chance. You're not going to get a big advance, and now you and Ferriss are the Stoics. Right? You're the young guys talking about Stoicism.
Right.
And, was that always a plan? Is it something you wanted to do?
Yeah, so it's funny, I got offered I wrote an article for Tim Ferriss's website in maybe like 2008, maybe 2007, a long time ago, about Stoicism, which I'd always been interested in. And I got an offer to do a book deal from a very small press. They said, hey, we love this idea of Stoicism for entrepreneurs. You want to write a book about it? So I'm like 23 maybe. And when a 22, 23-year-old gets an offer to do a book, you're like, this is amazing. I just hit like the jackpot. And I remember I talked to Robert Greene about it, and he was like, I don't think you should do it. And he was like, I don't think you have the life experiences yet to justify this, and I don't think you're as good enough of a writer, which was obviously very hard to hear, but I'm glad he did. A couple years later, I ended up selling Trust Me I'm Lying, which was a marketing book, had a much better and wider audience. Marketing books sell for more money, right? So it allowed me to cash in a better way and launch in a better fashion. And then I had this Stoicism book queued up, like I sold that. But Obstacles Away sold for less than half what Trust Me I'm Lying sold for. So it was a step backwards in some ways, but I knew, and because I managed my career this way, like I was able to take that risk as well. Like the standard path would be do another marketing book or become like a marketing, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I'd set myself up that I was able to take that. You always want to, the more sort of financial freedom you cultivate in your life, the less you're going to be dependent on doing things the way you're supposed to do them or the way that other people want you to do them.
Right. Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom.
Oh, that's great.
There you go.
Yeah, in all things, not just if you're physically disciplined, you have more freedom, and then if you're financially disciplined, it's not like you have fuck you money, but you have money that you can say, I don't think I want to do it that way.
Right. And the cover of Obstacle and the cover, I think, if it's Trust Me I'm Lying, couldn't have been different. I mean, one of them, you're smoking a cigarette in a leather jacket looking dodgy, and the other one has got like the leaves, the maple leaves or whatever, like, right? So that's a conscious choice.
Yeah, I mean, they come from very different places. Yeah. I'm in one book, and the other book is not about me. And I wanted it to be, I realized that not everyone loves what I said in Trust Me I'm Lying. And look, I totally get, you might not like me, but I wanted the book I wanted the book to be independent of me. So you can like me and I think the book is good. You can hate me and I think begrudgingly you're going to have to admit that the book is good and that whatever you don't like about me is not in the book. Right. I think that's important. I think sometimes people, out of their own ego, they want credit, they want the attention, they want to be front and center, and that can alienate audiences who are not interested in that.
Okay. Now, Obstacle comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It was sold, but it didn't go too crazy until it kind of went viral later.
Yeah.
And some big sports teams and big coaches, NFL people or basketball people, started picking it up. First of all, in the background of all this, you are advising, high-profile authors on big book launches. I know people, I won't mention their names, that have used your services to launch their books. You guys are known as the guys that know how to do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
How does that, when you try to launch your own book with your own skills, is it trickier?
Well, it's nice because I actually listen to myself. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like when you have a client, let's say even a great client's only going to listen to you 90% of the time, right? What I like about doing my own stuff is I get to prove the theories that I would like to advance on other people's books. So I get to be more experimental. I get to, it's like I control all of it. So I think I can do things that I then can maybe apply to a different person with a bigger platform or a different style of book. So I see some of my own launches that way.
Okay.
But
what's the biggest mistake people make?
Books?
Yeah, the funny thing is when people launch books, a lot of times they'll have a publisher, and the publisher has a way of doing things that's, kind of sometimes dark ages, like we're going to pick the thing and we're going to do the thing, and then, I'm guessing you might say, all right, it's time to talk to podcasts, it's time to start blogging, it's time to do this.
I would say the biggest mistake that people make with books is that they think they write the book, they go off in there, they have like, oh, I'm going to be like Hemingway, I'm going to move to France, I'm going to write this book, and then it's going to be done, and then I'm going to think about how to sell it to people. And really, you have to think about the audience from the beginning. You have to say, who is this for? What do they like? What is the bet? Like, here's what I believe, and here's what I need to express to the world. That's my artistic mission. But what's the best way to do that? Like, how can I make sure that it's actually interesting to people? And so people think that creating and marketing are these totally distinct phases, and really one almost has to come before the other.
Right.
So it's like they make great, smart people write a book that is inherently not that marketable or sellable, and then they want to add these tricks on after the fact. They think it's a matter of going on shows or doing some crazy stunt. That's at the end of the day, the only reason a book sells is because you read it and you tell your friend or your mom or your dad or your brother or whoever or your employees, you're like, this is good, please read this.
Right.
And so that's the most essential marketing choice or process, and people don't think about that.
So if you get in early with them, you can work with them as they're writing the book or before they start writing. That's what you'd rather do with clients. Yeah.
And look, some people get lucky, right? They go off in the cave and they come back with it.
Hemingway.
But not always.
Okay.
Yeah, like Hemingway said, sitting down and writing is easy. It's like sitting at a typewriter and bleeding. And the reality is, like, you can look, he was a meticulous editor. He on A Farewell to Arms, on The Sun Also Rises, I think he rewrote the ending like 50 times because what's the best ending? What's the best way to do this? Yeah. And you have to bring that intensity to the creative process. It's not whatever comes out of your pen is genius.
Right, and then this is why short chapters, consumable, the format, you're thinking about all this beforehand, including your intro, your personal story on ego. Okay.
Well, look, I'm a nerd, so I would love to talk about this for 600 pages. But that's not the best way to reach people. And so if you're telling me that I have to do it in 218 pages, but I'll reach more people, and then afterwards we can have an in-depth conversation, that's the decision I'm going to make.
Okay. All right, talk about Obstacle real quick, and then I want to get to Ego. So it came out, and later it starts to get embraced by these sports figures. How was the launch? How did it feel? And did you ever see that coming?
Yeah, it went okay. It went better than okay, right? It sold well. It was in its third or fourth printing. It's chugging along, and I started to get emails from people in the sports world, and that was something that was totally unexpected. I got an email from a coach for the New England Patriots, someone who works for the Oklahoma City Thunder, somebody who's a mental strength coach for the Colorado Rockies. So, professional basketball, baseball, football, I'm getting these emails, and I was so flattered by it. One of the things I said was I just emailed these people and I was like, this is really cool. You tell me who you want me to send books to and I'll hook them up. Like, however many books you need, let me know. Because like I'm saying, everything is about word of mouth. And so I sent them a bunch of books and they connected me with their friends, and all of a sudden it starts spreading through traditional sport, or through professional sports. Just physical copies.
Well, what happened to online? What happened to marketing? What happened to retweets?
Well, you do those things, right? And it's like the coach for the Patriots, he heard about it on a podcast or a blog post that somebody wrote. Like, those sports coaches and VCs and movie producers, all these people that everyone's trying to impress, they're on the internet too, right? Yeah. They read smart people. They're fans of people like you. Like, I imagine you hear from people who are in your audience that you have no idea that they were fans, and you're like, wow. And so you do the normal marketing, and then if you have a good product, you're gonna hear from influencers, and then you've got to put in the work and the hustle to turn that into more. Right.
I guess you got that idea even from working with clients. Like, send books to these people. They're influencers. Do that.
Totally. And I saw how Robert Greene's book spread through hip hop. Right, like rappers started talking about it,
and the last people you might expect.
And you have to embrace those people. It's like, if someone is resonating with your work, like I wrote it thinking business people would like it. If a sports coach likes it, we're friends now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say like, I'm going to be as open-minded as possible, and I want to learn from them. I want to hear how my book's not as good as it could be, or things that they see in their job that would help me understand what I was trying to talk about.
Right. Okay, so this happens, it starts getting this whole kind of subculture, second kind of life, which is great. Now, when do we decide to go back to American Apparel? Because, you didn't have to do that, but you did that. Now, it could have been the reason for this next great book, but like, can you tell me what was going through your mind? And was it happening around the last time you were here?
It was all overlapping, and so it's hard to say what happened. But I remember right around the time the launch of Obstacle was finishing. So it would have been after I saw you. I got a call that American Apparel had fired the CEO, and they wanted me to come back to work as advising on the sort of transition and the creative team. And I said, yeah. Like, I just didn't even think, like, I've always been someone that swung at every pitch, and I felt a lot of loyalty to the company. I still do, and I'm glad I swung at the pitch, because I learned a lot, and it ended up creating a pain point that led to this book. But the idea of just jumping into chaos was sort of my MO in my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you had walked away though, and now you're in Austin, and you got your goats, and you're writing books.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing you hadn't done work for American Apparel really the last 3 or 4 years?
I never had to be, like, I always worked and we were always collaborating on stuff, but like, I remember it was a point I was at the factory, and it was like 9 a.m. and I was like, I was at my house at an apartment I was renting, and I was like, I got to get to the office. It's like 9 a.m. And then it was like, I haven't had to do this in years. Like, I wrote these books, I developed freedom for myself, and here I am feeling guilty I'm not showing up in an office. Like, this is not the life that I want. This is going in the wrong direction. And that was help. Like, realizing that was important.
Right, and you went back into a very chaotic situation.
Sure, it was a hostile takeover, and it was nuts.
Well, I don't want to go too deep into it, but like, your relationship with Dove over the years. He brought you on really early. American Apparel made big, bold moves, that were amazing and still are amazing, always will be. At one point, do you start to say, okay, this is getting a little crazy, okay, this is getting more crazy, now this is getting destructive for the company? Like, at one point, do you start seeing this? And did you go back in to just kind of help that?
Yeah, so he wasn't there when I went back, right?
Okay.
Because he'd been let go. But you get a sense, it's funny, in retrospect things are always clear, but at the time there's good and bad, and you can't figure out what outweighs what. I think for me, what made it so hard is that he was someone I admired. I saw parts of myself in him, and he saw parts of himself in me. And so when it all, hit the fan, now you're now you're going, well, what parts, right? Like, do I have this capacity within me? Like, are we all somewhat self-destructive like this? You know, I admire him and I look up to him, and you cannot argue with what he created, but you also can't argue, you also have to look at the fact that where it is now, right? And you have to say, well, how does one come to jeopardize everything that they built? And I really wanted to learn from that. I think I did.
Do you think something that great can be created and not also be kind of destroyed by that same person?
Well, sadly it's the saddest but most timeless story of entrepreneurship, is that the person who builds the company is incapable of running it because they're so close to everything, their identity, it's like their baby. It's not a new CEO comes in and it's a business to him. He might care a great deal about the business and he might think that it's important and has purpose, but it wasn't birthed by him, so he can see it clearly and objectively, and you have to be able to do that. Look, there's people like Mark Zuckerberg who don't have that problem, but some people are more the founder type and others are the running type, and some are both, but you got to know your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I find them hand to hand. I mean, I used to roll in New York City with like some of the top traders, you know, in the city, and like at the same time, they would be the ones that like were almost killing themselves on the weekend, partying, like just doing the dumbest stuff possible. And these are guys that were at the top of their game, top of their universities. Obviously, were able to bring it, and this is partially also me doing the same things. And it's just like, what are you doing? But they almost go together, like protein and fat. They kind of go together to a certain extent.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, I think ego makes us, the first pro side of ego is that it makes us ambitious. It makes us think we can do huge things. And so we we do big things, right? But the problem is that we tend to overreach, or there's that, the other side of the razor is the dangerous part, right? It's the overreaching, it's the thinking we're God, it's the thinking that everything we do is going to be flawless, you know, and that's where we tend to jeopardize this other thing that we were also responsible for building.
Right. Low point for you back at American Apparel, you know, your relationship's getting strained.
Yeah.
I guess you're probably around a lot of negative energy as well.
You absorb dysfunction, you know, or I do at least. And yeah, so it was just, it was sort of that way. It was like, what am I doing? This is not what I want out of my life. I'm being paid handsomely, but it's not making me happy, and it's not what I wanted out of life, you know, and I had to step away. And I'm glad I did. It's like sometimes you realize what's important to you when it's jeopardized, or you have to realize what's not important to you. Like, you have to touch the stove, so to speak, get burned, and go, okay, I'm not going to touch that again.
Right. Talk to me about working and you and being a workaholic or working a lot. You don't actually strike me as that guy. Again, maybe you have this alter ego than when I meet you, but like, you're not the guy that's not present when you're here. You're talking to me, you're looking at me. You don't seem like you're thinking about all the work you got to do. You're definitely not on your phone. You never were. So you don't come across as the guy who's completely obsessed with work.
I have fits of that, I think, but for me, it's the role it takes on in my life. So it's not, you know, a workaholic is not necessarily someone who works 20 hours a day. It's, you know, is the work the most essential thing? And there's this Bertrand Russell quote. He says, like, the first sign of an impending nervous collapse is the belief that your work has become terribly important. And so it's like, when you feel like, if I don't do this, the world will end, that is an unhealthy, delusional, egotistical belief. It's like, hey, what you're doing is important, and it's glad you're doing it, but by the way, we're all human, we're gonna die, and none of this matters. You know, like, you have to have that you know, yin and yang, and I definitely have gone through phases where I've totally lost sight of that.
Yeah, me too, like today. So like around here, you know, it's like, all right, Ryan's coming to, we've had 4 shows this week, right? So yesterday was Professor David Nutt at Imperial College. Tomorrow's Scott Coker, CEO of Bellator Fighting Championships. It's like, Ryan's coming today, everything's gotta be ready, da-da-da-da-da. I walk outside and I was like, oh, it's a sunny day.
Right.
The rest of the world doesn't care about all of our little problems at London Real. They're doing normal things, or their things. Sometimes it hits me.
Yeah, they call it adrenalizing. you become addicted to the adrenaline. And it's not like a drug where you have to go buy it and then inject it. It's like you can just seek out the adrenaline. You're like, oh, I've got to do this and I got to do that. And I tend to find like if I'm around chaos, it spurs that in me. So if one thing starts to go wrong in my life, all of a sudden I start meddling with all these other things in my life, and it gets me going. It feels amazing, and then the problem is I start neglecting the things that are actually important. I stop writing, I stop thinking, I stop sleeping. I'm just go. I'm very intense like that, and if like I'm trying to be a writer and I want to be doing this till I'm 80 years old, that is not a sustainable way of existing.
Yeah, I'm guessing you weren't doing a lot of writing when you're handling American Apparel business.
No, and it's like I'd already sold this book. It was like I had a deadline. I had to deliver this book, and here I am, cleaning up somebody else's mess, getting paid for it. I consented to it, but you have to know what's important to you, and you have to be able to prioritize properly. And I think ego, when we're in the throes of ego, we try to do everything for everyone, and we think that we're superhuman and that our quality of work, like I'd always said yes to every single thing in my life, and I never even stopped doing the things that I had started doing. And I guess I believed, and this is absurd, that I didn't have a limit. There was no okay, that's my full capacity. And I think around that time in American Apparel, I just crashed into it as hard, going full speed. And
because like you look at all the titles, I mean, that was a long intro I gave, because you were still you're still the editor at large, you're still running your company.
Sure, I can take it on, sure. And I mean, even now I do that, where it's like, oh, you want me to do this thing in October? Sure. And then it's like, oh, I'll figure it out when we get to October. And really it's like when you have a family or you have a business or you have a passion of yours, you're giving time away that you already promised to other people. And I think that's what's so bad about it.
Right. You also just said yes to something recently. You're going to be a father soon,
I am.
Right?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Which is a weird, for me, it's a ego lessening experience. In my opinion, that whole concept. How did you find that decision, and then how does that relate to ego?
Yeah, I mean,
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. No, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I was obsessed with some little thing, and I was like, when I have a kid, like, he's not gonna give a shit about this, and he's not gonna know what he's not gonna care, and it's not more important than him, right? And he's not gonna forgive me for not being there because, like, I agreed to do some. Oh, I'll come talk to your group, or oh yeah, sure, I can consult on that. He's not going to be like, well, I'm so glad you did that. It was definitely more important than me. So hopefully it'll be a good reminder of things.
Yeah, and the funny thing about kids, I just had a boy about 6 weeks
congrats.
ago, so it's all good. And I was 45.
And you're awake right now?
I am awake. Yeah, my female partner is a warrior, so she's taking all the hits for London Real as well. That's why I'm present. But it's like that boy is going to meet me properly in a few years, and he's never going to meet the guy that is the story I'm telling myself about that did all these great things.
Yeah.
And so your child is never going to meet the guerrilla marketer guy, this guy. He's just going to know if dad was there in 3 or 4 years, out to the next 20 years, and what he was like then. So you got to kind of really think about that.
Well, and although he or she can't articulate what you're depriving them of now, that has a profound effect on them the rest of their life. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, they're not going to be like, yeah, I don't feel attachment to my parents, but it's okay because my dad did a lot of important interviews while I was a baby. Do you know what I mean? Like, they just want you there, and I think it's not, having kids is not the only reason to not do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's weird. Like, we would do it for another person, but you would never, if you're an ambitious person, you would never say, like, I'm not doing that for myself. And it's not good for me to say yes to every single thing and to wear myself to the bone and burn the candles at both ends or whatever. I'm not going to do that because it's just not okay. I think normal people don't struggle with that.
Yeah, I think kids were engineered into us just to check that ego, and as we wait long periods of time to have them, it goes astray.
Interesting. Yeah, sure.
And I'm getting all these weird theories lately too. And also it's like, I have a stepdaughter as well, and having this other baby in the room, it changes everyone's ego in the house, because everyone was a little bit me now, and now there's this thing over here where, whoa, we got all kind of, and now it calms the whole room down, and I'm already thinking, wait a second, was this all part of this humanity plan?
Yeah, you deferred it, or like even me, like I'm almost 30, and it's like, evolutionarily, this is 10, 12 years late, right?
Yeah,
Maybe even more.
Yeah.
And what was, did I deprive myself of something that would have made me more humble or more sort of externally focused on other people and stuff like that? Maybe.
Yeah. Michael Douglas had his first son when he was busy with his whole career and his movie career. And if you remember Michael Douglas in the 80s, he was the kind of the guy doing all these great movies. And I think a couple years ago, he was in the courtroom while the judge was sentencing his son for like heroin dealing or something. And yet he had another baby with Catherine Zeta-Jones, who he had spent a lot of time with. And it was just like these two yin and yangs of a parent being there and not being there. And he even admitted it was just like, wow. So you can kind of see maybe an ego play. Maybe that was one of your index cards. I don't know.
I should write it down now.
But there could be something there. All right, talk to me about this tattoo on your arm. You had it put on there before really the book came into place. And then talk to me about how the book started.
Yeah, this phrase, it just came to me. I don't actually know where it came from. And I probably stole it from someone smarter than me. Probably read it in some book somewhere and I forgot to write it down. But it's this idea that, ego is the worst possible element that you can introduce into any situation, right? Like someone says something rude to you. You have this ego, now all of a sudden there's a conflict. If you're confident in yourself, you don't care. Like you could say whatever you want to me, right? Like that's not gonna bother me, I might leave, but you're introducing ego into these things, that's where it's a problem. You're experiencing transformational success, you win the lottery, you get a platinum album, your #1 album in the country, you bring ego to that, it's gonna go to your head, you're gonna start to believe you're amazing. Or, rock bottom, like you're worst. You introduce ego into that equation, it's everyone else's fault. You're gonna get them back for screwing you. Or like, I'm worthless, I deserve this. So to me, it's like I just wanted a constant reminder that I should never make decisions out of ego. I should make decisions based on facts, should make decisions based on principles, but never ego.
It's strong to get a tattoo. It's not like, just so everyone knows, it's not like Ryan's got tats everywhere.
No, these are my only two. I have the obstacle is the way on one arm, right, which I feel like I've yet to find a situation in which that didn't also improve things, right? So no matter what happens, I can derive some benefit from that situation. And, unless my arm gets cut off, even then, maybe the benefit is that I got rid of my tattoo.
Right.
But I can see every situation that is a formula that helps things, and ego is the enemy is the same way. I think there's this famous story from Lincoln. I forget where he gets it, but he says, this ancient king, he asked his wisest advisors. He said, find me some advice that's true in all situations, good or bad. And has been true and always will be true. And what they came back with was, and this too shall pass, right? Which is totally true. And so I think the obstacle is the way and ego is the enemy are two similar phrases that are true in every situation and will always be true.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
Be patient. Like even as someone who was successful early, it still took longer than you think, right? Like I started my blog in 2006. My first book came out in 2012, and that's half my 20s, right? And when I think back on my own life, so I guess I can only speak for myself, when I look at like my worst moments, I see a lot of my own involvement in them, right? I decided to do this. Someone in my life told me I shouldn't do this. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to do it anyway. And it blew up in my face.